Thank you very much. Thanks, Matej. Thanks, Daniel, for introducing our project. And I will now focus on one of our three, let's say, policy pillars. We developed, as Daniel has explained, a range of tools and guidance on three topics: connected automated mobility, UVAR, which will be the topic of the next session, and for what concerns me, mobility as a service. I'm also happy to have already cleared the path from the fact that innovation in mobility is not only technology. So thanks for introducing this concept, but because when it comes to MaaS, it's clearly tempting to intend MaaS basically as a say digitalization process, a near digitalization process, but well, this is a part of the concept, a very important part of the concept. I have prepared a poll. I don't know if it's possible to launch it. So
I think it is.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so we have a poll question. What is MaaS? And there are three possible results, answers. So I think we could see the results now, and Gabriele will interpret what the audience has said. So yeah.
Okay, excellent. So the question is, what is MaaS? We have three options. So MaaS is an app which integrates services and provides integrated access. Is a sustainable mobility planning tool, and it's nice to see that also many people have mentioned that, or is an ecosystem of services which can be provided together. Well, correct answer is the three concepts matching each other basically, because MaaS is a, let's say, complex and very important tool in order to, let's say, promote a sort of shift of paradigm in mobility, in what we are used to consider mobility. So it enables the integration, so a new way of using the information in order to access the mobility network. It enables a new way of doing business in mobility, so integrating services, creating new composite intermodal services, and so providing mobility networks which are closer to the citizens and that foster the behavioral change. And of course, it's a very important and powerful tool because it helps you to know more and better and to adapt better to the mobility needs of the citizen from the policymaker's point of view. So when we look at mobility as a service, as we said before, we are not talking about something merely technological. Technology is our enabler, one of the enablers, but there's a lot of work to do, from the planning to the implementation to the maintenance and the path towards sustainability of a concept of mobility as a service. So once we said so, just a little bit of background after the common definition. So mobility as a service has different levels of implementation, also levels of functionalities, which go from the basic information of integration of information. So we have tools such as multimodal route planners, which tell us more about what our mobility options which can be one mode of transport or a combination of many modes of transport. And we have some examples of platforms, of digital platforms, which really do this very, very well. We have a second level, which is the integration of certain functionalities which make our trip easier. If we can buy a ticket, if we can book a travel, if we can pay for our tickets. This is, of course, making our experience, we say, seamless, so more continuous along the modal chain. We have a third level, which is the, let's say, most advanced at the time, which is the integration of the service offer, which is supposed to not only make our travel easier, but also more convenient, because it's bundling services according to our preference, and therefore also more customized. So as we are used to use our car or our own bike in the way which is more suitable for us, which is more suitable according to our preferences, we should be able to use a group of services, of sustainable mobility services, in the most appropriate and most fitting way for our habits. But there is another level, which is the level that every policymaker aims at achieving, of course, which is the capability of integrating into this seamless concept also the so-called societal goals. So use mobility as a service, use this integration process, not only to make transport more efficient, the matching between demand and supply more immediate and more fitting, but also to transform the networks into, from the demand and from the supply side, into more sustainable concepts, integrating low carbon paradigms, integrating the optimization of resources. When for resources in mobility, what do we intend? The scarce resources of mobility are, for sure, the energy we are using in order to move. But let me quote two other important ones, is the time we travel and is the space we consume for mobility. So these three elements in the policymakers' objectives have to be continuously optimized. And last but not least, transport must be for all, and therefore provide equal opportunities to all citizens, and therefore has to be inclusive. In which way we want to reach this higher level is the big question of mobility as a service, therefore. This question, of course, is partially, let's say, we are accompanied towards providing a good answer to this question by an existing topic guide, which complements the SAMP methodology and which is dedicated to mobility as a service, which you will find on the LTIS platform, is the mobility as a service and sustainable urban mobility planning topic guide. And basically this guide has, let's say, provide us information on three main aspects. So the first one is to guide us towards, well, along the SAMP cycle, for those who have a bit knowledge of the planning process of SAMPs, and help us in detail and supports us in planning for mobility as a service. The second component of this guide is how to have a preliminary benchmark assessment of our readiness level. So there is a specific tool which is called the MaaS readiness indicator that you can use in order to see how your territory, the territory where you're planning for MaaS, is let's say ready, and what are the elements which have to be improved in order to implement an effective MaaS. And the third interesting pillar of this guide is the codification of three mainstream operational and governance models. So how the MaaS is growing, how the MaaS is either organized top down, or it's growing from the market towards the planning. There are three main models that we took as examples for developing our activities in accessibility. So what did we do in accessibility for C? We started from this existing framework. We analyzed the needs and the gaps identified by our city partners in terms of what we would need operationally in order to start planning or to continue efficiently planning for MaaS. And then we did, of course, some research. We did some work with the local stakeholders, engaging them in the identification and, let's say, co-design of suitable solutions for implementing successful MaaS schemes. And now, in the last side of the project, we have to somehow codify all this information and make it available as a tool, as outputs to hopefully more cities with a focus on Central Europe that would like to follow our experiences and take the best from it and develop their own mobility as a service concept. So what you will see today basically is the description of these two outputs, which will be shortly then available by the end of the project, that are one specific annex to this guideline, providing specific to this topic guide, providing specific guidance in the context of Central Europe, and focusing on one which was that is considered one of the most important gaps in mobility as a service from our cities, which is the integration between traditional networks and traditional services, namely public transport services, and the new mobility services. We are talking about shared and flexible services. Shared, like car sharing, bike sharing, and so on. Flexible, mainly demand responsive transport for peripheral areas, and so on. Another very important aspect we focused on is, of course, the local engagement. The local engagement where we made quite precise and extensive experience during the project, and we want to share them with as many cities as possible in Europe. Second output is going to be a tool. It is a tool. The tool is focused on understanding the implications of different governance models. I will show you briefly what it means. When you start planning for MaaS, according to the characteristics of your territory and your mobility network, you might have to consider some points of attention when your planning model is going to be rather one governance model or the other. But it will be clearer for sure when I show you the governance model. So very quickly, this was the process. We built on one side the topic guide, focusing on three elements. So the planning steps for MaaS, evaluating the readiness for MaaS, and providing a bit of a more context and let's say guidance on what are the implications of different models. On the other side, the self-assessment tool. The self-assessment tool is basically a questionnaire. I will be happy to share it with you then in the next days and weeks, hoping that you want to, let's say, test it and play a bit with us, which is giving you then hints and recommendations according to different scenarios. So let's I give you a bit of an overview on what is going to be the structure and what is going to be inside our topic guide annex that I repeat. It's focused on the needs of Central Europe cities and functional urban areas. We will have some case studies and good practices. We identified a few from, let's say, beyond our project framework, which is Vienna, Helsinki, Antwerp, and Amsterdam. And we will focus, of course, on our 3 case studies. So Graz, where the process of developing MaaS is ongoing, and the existing local mobility app will be integrated on a mobility as a service perspective, and certain strategic elements are under discussion. For example, the development of mobility packages for different personas, for different kind of citizens or potential users, in order to foster the use of sustainable mobility. The example of Budapest, where the mobility as a service app is already in place, and the process is to progressively integrate more services coming from the new mobility services side. So the integration of demand responsive transport, which is already in place in Budapest, is ongoing. There will be a process going on for integrating new and other services, therefore the car sharing, the bike sharing, the micro mobility services, and so on. And last but not least, also the very big issue of integrating short and long distance, so local transport with the railway network, for example. We will have some, let's say, good practices on how, hopefully well, our self-assessment tool is working in giving strategic guidance. Therefore, we are opening, let's say, a campaign, not only inside the project, but also outside, on testing our tool and, let's say, improving its consistency. And we will integrate in the annex some good examples on how the tool is able to provide fitting strategic guidance for building mobility as a service. And the central part, the one you see in yellow or orange, will be our step-by-step guidance. As we said, we will follow the SAMP cycle, and we are focusing on 4 main elements which emerged by the discussion with our stakeholders and our cities. So we will focus on local engagement and demand analysis, on the data issue, availability, quality, standardization, and sharing and management. We will focus on what incentive schemes and incentive measures can support and be still economically efficient, the take-up of MaaS. And of course, on our big theme, so how to better guarantee that there is a high level of engagement and involvement of traditional and new service providers, and so how to foster the collaboration among these kind of services. So let me share with you some preliminary results of that you will find then in our annex that refer to the central part of the annex, which I was briefly describing. Now are in a sort of let's say slogan code, but we will give, of course, a bit more background and a bit more precise guidance. So first of all, let's talk about one of the 4, let's say, pillars of this part. So the stakeholder engagement. So what we identified from the experience, from the guidance given by experts and stakeholders, but also from the experience of our pilots, not pilots, but our, let's say, cities directly engaged into the topic, into the process. So first hint is it seems that building mobility as a service is a bottom-up work. It's a full-time job, and it's about listening to people, analyzing people's needs, analyzing mobility opportunities, and having in mind a very specific objective, which is how to reach the current car users in order to build with them and for them a viable alternative. So the second recommendation is let's work at micro level. So not, let's say, it's not necessary to start with developing policies, but implement services and make sure that these work on the territory before say, thinking of an integrator, or together with thinking of how to integrate them better to make them more effective. Then designing infrastructure for mobility as a service is important. So mobility as a service is an app, but not only an app. And in many cases, you might need multi-mobility hubs, places where demand and supply meet and integrate physically, clearly. You have to engage customers and well, users and citizens in identify and choose what are the services which are more suitable and more interesting for them in order to foster their behavioral change. Therefore, you can organize test days, as in many cities have been are being organized periodically in order to test mobility innovations, to collect information on how desirable certain services are and how they say push the opportunity of replacing private mobility with shared and with flexible services. And last but not least, you have to create trust. So you have to work so that the mobility behavior is changing because there is trust on a new model, on a new paradigm. And for example, finding allies among mobility managers of companies, of territories, areas, transport flows, attractor poles, etc. It's absolutely fundamental. The second issue is the data availability. Honestly, when we started this process, this was the topic which was concerning me most, because I know there's a lot of discussion, a lot of technicalities about what is the best data and how to share it, and what is, then I'm not an IT guy, so I was double scared about what could happen, what could be the technological difficulties and so on. Actually, when you talk with MaaS implementers, this is of course important, but the technical issue is not so central. What is central is the data policy element. So you have to create, you have to make companies and operators, new services, wanting and willing to share the data. So in some cases, create incentives or create fostering regulations for data sharing. You have to aim big. So you have to go for an ecosystem of rules which fosters the exchange of data, but also fosters the fact that the algorithms which regulate the integration among data are transparent. In other words, that I can ensure that whatever mobility as a service platform I'm going to implement, this is providing my citizens with the best but also more sustainable mobility options, so that they can openly compare different alternatives, and therefore that my mobility as a service is complying with, for example, my sustainable development goals, which is a very, very important long-term issue for and challenge for mobility. You have, of course, to work a bit on the standardization of the integration process of data. This is stuff for IT people, but very, very important. And last but not least, you have to be very, very aware on what data you need in order to perform your mobility as a service functionalities. So ask only for the data you need, because some data are, let's say, business intelligence for the companies. Some data are personal endowment of the citizens. You really have to work on identify for each function, what are the data needed and what is the more efficient way of collecting it without overwhelming or scaring our actors in the mobility as a service ecosystem. Third aspect, the incentive measures and schemes that you can put in place to, let's say, foster the take-up of MaaS. MaaS is a nice concept. It's a very promising idea when you present it at first. You will be able to integrate services. You will not need your car anymore, etc. But it's a concept that has to be animated. It has to be animated on two sides. On the supply side, you have to be able to attract all the services which are liked by the citizens and put them together in a sustainable way. On the other side, of course, the demand side, you have to foster the participation by citizens, so foster their adoption. So we have some measures, incentive measures on both sides. The first recommendations which came from several sides is, let's use the stick and carrot strategy. So let's be creative. Let's always provide the stakeholders, especially from the supply side, with a mix of demand and supply incentives. The second aspect is use wisely your money. So you can make public calls for joint development of new services in order to mix traditional and new. The third one is focus on operators, support the development also bottom up of new services, for example, peer-to-peer services, etc. Also providing easy access to the market. Then focus on users. Their user experience is fundamental. If your MaaS is not easy to be used, that's the problem, that's an issue. And then remember what is the main aim. You want to take people out of their cars, and if they have to think how they should use an alternative to the car, they will get to the car because it's the most flexible option ever, and it will always be like that, unfortunately. Last group of messages is related on how to match traditional and new, and this is a lot about trust. You have to integrate policies, so develop spatial planning policies together with integrated mobility. Work on the integration between the traditional services and the flexible demand responsive transport, for example, when you do more spatial planning and development in the peripheries, look on variety of options. So please try to, let's say, engage as many actors as possible. And then last but not least, MaaS is an ecosystem. So societal goals can be pursued by let's say a mix of services, a wide mix of services that have to work well together. So let me briefly introduce the self-assessment tool, as I guess I'm running out of time.
Yeah, maybe because we have 5 minutes left, maybe this is also a good time for attendees to ask questions, so we will not lose time with that. So please do ask questions to Gabriele, and the word is yours again. Sorry.
Okay, yes. So if there's any question, just interrupt me. And, I just wanted to introduce you this. This is our self-assessment tool. The self-assessment tool, as I said, there are tools which focus on readiness and maturity. So how ready is your environment? We wanted to add something a little bit. So not only if it's ready, if it's mature, but how is it going to work, your MaaS idea, if your model is either the commercial integrator, so market-oriented, the public transport as integrator. So the public transport is developing a MaaS and integrating other service, or something in between. Let's say, call it more community-oriented, where the public administration provides an open back end, and through this open back end, data are gathered and shared under certain rules among MaaS players. So what we thought we do is collect the data through a questionnaire, about the reference area and about the mobility services. Identify and check the answers against a range of challenges which are very relevant for mobility, for building mobility as a service, and build scenarios. The scenarios are built in two ways. The first part is a SWOT analysis, strengths, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, to say like what you have to take care and how is your initial picture, and then provide some strategic guidance on what happens if the governance model is A, B, C. So is market-oriented, is public transport-oriented, or is public administration-oriented? Just let's make it simple like that. Therefore, we have, I show you very quickly, you will have the slides, and hopefully, if you are available for this test, you will also receive the questionnaire from our side. So it's 18 questions on territorial and institutional characteristics, the reference area under the socioeconomic point of view, the operational characteristics of the mobility network, and the market characteristics. So are there already services which are competing, collaborating, and so on. This is how it looks now, the first, let's say, report. On one side, you have the SWOT, as I said. On the other side, you have the recommendations. I leave you with just an example of some exercise we did yesterday. So this is the example of challenges and recommendations that you are going to receive when you fill the questionnaire according to, and this is an example of one of the three operational modes. So I would leave you with a, let's say, a request or an invitation then to join our group and testing together with us these tools. So all cities, administrations, mobility planners which are here in the webinar, and they are interested in testing this tool and having this report, which is intended to be as a starting checklist for a discussion on how to develop a MaaS project, a MaaS process. Please contact me, or we will then share also the institutional links of the project in the future, and we will be happy to share with you the results, give you the questionnaire, share with you the results, and also assist you anytime and in any possible way in discussing possible implementation measures. Thank you very much, and